Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio, a Pan-African Nationalist and Garveyite network come to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Victor Medicine Podcast.
I think black people require too much buy-in. Like, we constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, and we're kind of, continually staying behind.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
It don't matter. I think people so dumbed down, it wouldn't matter what you reveal to them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the simulation. They're going to keep doing what they did, they lemmings. So it really don't matter.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his woman.
The Cathedral Cheek Show.
When we start rising up to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let their brother go. They was waiting to see what black folks was going to do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? They're slave masters, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you pray to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Africans generally are welcoming of everyone. Sometimes, to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
Peace, family. We're back to the Africanist Warship. We're reading How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. This is chapter 4.4. We're going to wrap up chapter 4 today, which is really good. This was a long chapter. It was actually 88 pages. And so 88 pages would take us about 6 hours to read. But instead of reading it in one sitting, we decided to, read it, in pieces. So appreciate everybody for coming through. I see the chat's a little inactive right now, but, hopefully people come and we'll have our fun. That said, let's get to the reading. In the centuries before colonial rule... Oh, by the way, so I'm on Twitter right now. The comrades are here, so I'm about to read... This is Walter Rodney is a comrade. The comrades are here, so let's just... if you guys are excited, I'm excited. So let's see. In the centuries before colonial rule, Europe increased its economic capacity by leaps and bounds, while Africa appeared to have been almost static. Africa in the late 19th century could still be described as part communal and part feudal, although Western Europe had moved completely from feudalism to capitalism. To elucidate the main thesis of this study, it is necessary to follow not only the development of Europe and the underdeveloped of Africa, but also to understand how the two combined in a single system, that of capitalist imperialism. So the European economy was producing far more goods by making use of their own resources and labor, as well as the resources and labor of the rest of the world. There were many qualitative changes in the European economy which accompanied and made possible the increase in the quantity of goods. For example, machines in factories and provided the main source of wealth. So they didn't say what it was rather than. And labor had long since ceased to be organized on a restricted family basis. The peasantry had been all brutally destroyed, and the labor of men and women, women, and children was ruthlessly exploited. Those were the great social evils of the capitalist system, which must not be forgotten. But on the issue of comparative economics, the relevant fact is that there was a slight difference when the Portuguese sailed to West Africa in 1444 was a huge gap by the time that European robber statesmen sat down in Berlin 440 years later to decide who should steal which parts of Africa. It was that gap which provided both the necessity and the opportunity for Europe to move into the imperialist epoch and to colonize and further underdevelop Africa. So yeah, this is important right here. So essentially, Africa and Portugal were on comparable terms, but not really. You know, this is one of the things I don't know if you guys saw my chapter on economics, but this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about. How did Portugal surpass West Africa? How did Britain surpass Portugal? But one thing that we don't talk about enough is uh, why was Portugal comparable to West Africa at this point in time? Okay, my mouse just died for some reason. Um, why was Portugal comparable to West Africa at this point in time? Right? Uh, the reason behind that lies in Egypt, North Africa. Okay, it lies in North Africa. It lies in the Muslims. So, what we don't understand about world history is this, right? Or what we don't speak about in world history is this, and it does border on a little bit of the conspiracy theory in a sense, but it really isn't conspiracy theory. Egypt was the most technologically advanced nation on the planet, more or less. You know, Egypt, like I said in the writing, if you guys read, if you guys heard the thing I released earlier, Egypt, India, and China were considered the wealthiest nations in all history at this point in time, 1444. In a sense, right? Once upon a time. However, the Arabs, the Muslims conquered northern Africa and they conquered southern Europe. Okay? Portugal is in southern Europe. Spain is in southern Europe. The Muslims conquered them. What the Portuguese did, however, is they then defeated the Muslims in southern Europe. Okay? When they defeated the Muslims in southern Europe, what they inherited was the superior technology. Okay? With that superior technology, they were able to sail to West Africa. And they had, you know, all sorts of, you know, scientific, like they had the scientific advantage afterward. Because what people don't recall is that Egypt was the center of science at one point. You see? And because Egypt was the center of science at one point, that's like that really describes everything. So these people had a scientific advantage. When you have a scientific advantage on top of, you know, good economic policy, you will surpass a people to the point where, yeah, 440 years later, you're able to just carve them up. And I think that I want to stress that. Actually, he says right here, growing technology and economics, right? Basically science and economic philosophy, right? I want to stress that because it's how we can get ahead of these people. Like, we can get ahead of these people. I know we're thinking, hey, but look, they have a 440-year advantage. Yes and no. Yes and no. Anyway, hold on a second. Let's see what this is. So, let's see. The growing technological and economic gap between Western Europe and Africa was part of the trend within capitalism to concentrate or polarize wealth and poverty at two opposite extremes. Inside of Western Europe itself, some nations grew rich at the expense of others. Britain, France, and Germany were the most prosperous nations. Poverty prevailed in Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and southern Italy. So again, you see, these nations were the ones ahead. So the question becomes, how do these nations come ahead of these nations? And a part of it is not simply their economic philosophy, because what we don't remember is that Spain actually lost its armada. So it's a very faint memory for probably a lot of us, because we just heard it and we registered it, in history class, and then we just kind of glossed over it, like, what are they talking about? But the loss of the Spanish Armada was really the turning point in terms of, okay, now England has the superior maritime activity, superior in trade. But before that, obviously, it didn't. Anyway, so inside the British, French, and German economies, the polarization of wealth was between the capitalists on the one hand and the workers and a few peasants on the other. The big capitalists got bigger and the little ones were eliminated. In many important fields such as iron and steel manufacture, textile, and particularly banking, it is noticeable that 2 or 3 firms monopolized most of the business. The banks were also in a commanding position within the economy as a whole, providing capital to the big monopoly industrial firms. European monopoly firms operated by constantly gain control, fighting to gain control over raw materials, markets, and means of communications. They also fought to be the first to invest in new profitable undertakings related to their line of business, whether it be inside or outside their countries. Indeed, and this is investments. But investments are not guaranteed profit, but that's the way to get wealth. And again, we don't necessarily have this in our countries, right? Let me tell my boy to sit here. Hey, boy, come and sit here. Um, Gain control of over raw materials, markets, and so forth. They also, whether it be inside or outside their countries. Indeed, after the scope of expansion became limited inside of their national economies, their main attention was turned to those countries whose economies were less developed and who would therefore offer little or no opposition to the penetration of foreign capitalism. That penetration of foreign capitalism on a worldwide scale from the late 19th century onward is what we call imperialism. So, again, I wonder if I should show you guys. I think I probably should show you guys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my. I'm going to show you my chapter on. So I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book, and I want to show you guys this chapter on economics, because I think one thing that is of benefit for us is to really get a good understanding of economics. And I'm going to say our sister Cassandra Cheek said it was a good article. So if that's enough praise for me, you know what I mean. But quite a few people have said that it's pretty good. So I'm going to show you guys this little snippet. It's only 3 paragraphs, and I don't think I should read through it. You guys can check out the video when you choose to. But what I want to say is, you have this situation. So basically in the book, we're like, hey, look, be parsimonious, because the wealthy buy necessities first, money second, and luxuries last, right? And basically, a lot is here. So the Western world, the Western Hemisphere does, watch out for that. The Western Hemisphere does become rich. I mean, the Europeans become rich, right? But part of it is they are saving money. Now, obviously, they're stealing money too, and we're going to talk about that, right? They're stealing wealth from other nations. We're going to talk about that, but we have to also process that they are they're practicing good wealth management. Okay, and I say that because you have America and Brazil, right? And what happens between America and Brazil is this: Brazil has 10 times as many, or imports 10 times as many Africans from Africa than America does. But America still comes ahead. And the same with Spain. Spain, begins this process with Portugal of enslaving African people, and it has all these colonies across the world, and yet England surpasses it. And we know England is writing the Wealth of Nations and so on and so forth, right? And we know that Adam Smith is studying economics, and explaining certain policies, including saying parsimony, right? The socialists surpass the capitalists, though. And I don't think a lot of us really gather, like a lot of us understand what that means. But Russia starts off in this feudal economy. It's broke, and then eventually it's actually the first nation to go into space. Okay, so America is the advanced. We're the intelligent. We're this blah 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 blah. Right, and the Russians are able to go to space before the Americans are. The Americans land on the moon before the Russians do, but the Russians go to space before the Americans do. But bear in mind that America has 200-year advantage. So within and Russia does this within like 20-30 years of socialism. Like it passes the biggest capitalist nation on the planet in 20-30 years. And that's something that we have to start we have to seriously study. So the other one is, of course, the law of gain, which is buying in the cheapest market and selling in the dearest, which is sorry, the thing I wanted to talk about was this. The commonalities of the three wealthiest nations were that they had a focus on agriculture, a focus on manufacturing, and a lack of focus on foreign trade. The trouble with Africa today is that they do not have a lack of focus on foreign trade. Now, granted, it could be that the imperialists, the Westerners, can say, you're going to get this thing whether you like it or not, right? And they could have said that once upon a time. Today, it's not really what they're saying. Or even if it is what they're saying, the reality is that the demand for Western products is present. Okay? It is present. What African people in Africa hit me up saying, "Hey, you know what? I want a good phone. I just need to buy a new phone." They don't produce phones. Okay, they don't produce phones. I want to buy a new phone. I got to get a car. They don't produce cars. I got to get a car. When you are, I got to get what the foreigners have, right? And remember, it's like it even comes back to televisions. What are televisions? What are billboards? What are these things except for advertising? Advertising entities for so on and so forth. My point being, we as much as we may demonize or villainize these quote unquote imperialists, and I don't blame us for that, right? I don't blame us for villainizing the imperialists. As much as we may villainize them, we have to also come to terms with what's going on in Africa today. And so, I mean, that was a bit of a distraction. Hey, Forecast, what's up? Forecast is what's up, Oni. That was a bit of a little bit of a distraction, but I want you guys to go back. You can listen to that video on your own time. But before that, but in the meantime, let's just continue with this book, so we can finish it, eventually. So that's the thing I wanted to say about imperialism, is that realistically, maybe they created the demand for foreign goods, but you have to create a demand for your domestic goods. Like that's what we have to do, and that's what they did. That's what they did. So anyway, imperialism meant capitalist expansion. It meant that the European and North American and Japanese capitalists were forced by the internal logic of their competitive systems to seek abroad in less developed countries opportunities to control raw material supplies, to find markets, and to find profitable fields of investment. The centuries of trade with Africa contributed greatly to that state of affairs, where European capitalists were faced with a necessity to expand in a big way outside of their national economies, right? And again, China closed its doors. This was like during the 1950s or 1960s onward to up until recently. And you might say, well, China wasn't doing too well, in that interim. Maybe you can say that, maybe you can't, right? China's doing great today. And you could say, well, China's doing great because they opened. No. When you look at what the formula was, focus on agriculture, focus on manufacturing, lack of focus on foreign trade, right? Because the Chinese right now are building their own stuff. They're building their own stuff. Okay? When you see those three, right, you see why China's doing well. Because China already did well in the distant past. Okay, when we talk about the top three wealthiest nations, we're talking about China too. And this is during a time like before Europe had anything, China had something. Um, so yeah, we could say, hey, these white boys, they open, yeah, they're gonna find a way to sell to us. They didn't find a way to sell to China for a good 50 years. Now, of course, you could say, well, that ended. Yeah, okay, but look what came of it. Whereas with us, we're just going for these other people, and when you go to Africa, you'll see. If you're not in Africa already, you'll see. Or when you're in Africa, you'll see what it looks like. Um, there were certain areas of Africa in which European investment was meant to get immediate profits. The mines of South Africa, the loans to North African governments, and the building of the Suez Canal were in that category. The Suez Canal also ensured the greater profitability of European investments in and trade with India. However, Africa's greatest value to Europe at the beginning of the imperialist era was the source of raw materials such as palm products, groundnuts, cotton, and rubber. The need for those materials arose out of Europe's expanded economic capacity, its new and larger machines, and its increasing wage earning population in towns. All of those things had developed over the previous 4 centuries. And again, it needs to be repeated that one of the important factors in the process was the unequal trade with Africa. Imperialism is essentially an economic phenomenon, and it does not necessarily lead to direct political control or colonization. However, Africa was the victim of colonization. In the period of the notorious scramble for Africa, Europeans made a grab for whatever they thought spelled profits in Africa, and they even consciously acquired many areas not for immediate exploitation, but with an eye to the future. Each European nation that had the short-term and long-term economic interests ran up its own flag in different parts of Africa and established colonial rule. The gap that had risen during the period of pre-colonial trade gave Europe the power to impose political domination on Africa. Pre-colonial trade in slaves, ivory, gold, etc. was conducted from the coast of Africa. On the coast, European ships could dominate the scene, and if necessary, forts could be built. Before the 19th century, Europe was incapable of penetrating the African continent because of the balance of force at their disposal was inadequate. But the same technological changes which created the need to penetrate Africa also created the power to conquer Africa. The firearms of the imperialist epoch marked a qualitative leap forward. Breech loading rifles and machine guns were a far cry from the smooth-bored muzzle loaders and flintlocks of the previous era. European imperialists in Africa boasted that what counted was the fact that they had the Maxim machine gun and Africans did not. So again, that's not really. It was actually an anti-imperialist allegedly, but anyway. Curiously, Europeans often derive the moral justification for imperialism and colonialism from features of the international trade as conducted up to the eve of colonial rule in Africa. Oh, and let me just describe. That was Hilaire Belloc. Well, I mean, I don't know. It could be, millions of people. I don't know. But Hilaire Belloc is allegedly an anti-imperialist, and his a poem where he says, "No matter what happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not." But he was kind of, well, allegedly he was just mocking the European imperialists. But obviously, like, who cares? But I was just saying that just in case somebody wants to look it up. Organic African Paradigm is here. Oh, thanks, brother. He says he watched my video yesterday. Asante Sana. You guys check out, Forecast and Organic African Paradigm. The good brothers. Sorry, so let me go back to the. So it says, curiously, Europeans often derive the moral justification for imperialism and colonialism from features of the international trade as conducted up to the eve of colonial rule in Africa. The British were the chief spokesmen for the view that the desire to colonize was largely based on their good intentions in wanting to put a stop to the slave trade. True enough, the British in the 19th century were as opposed to slave trading as they were once in favor of it. Many changes inside of Britain had transformed the 17th century necessity for slaves into a 19th century necessity to clear the remnants of slavery from Africa so as to organize the local exploitation of land and labor. Therefore, slavery was rejected insofar as it had become a fetter on further capitalist development, and is particularly true of East Africa, where Arab slaving persisted until late in the 19th century. The British took special self-righteous delight in putting an end to Arab slave trading and in deposing rulers on the ground that they were slave traders. However, in those very years, the British were crushing political leaders in Nigeria like Jaja and Nana, who had by then ceased the export of slaves and were concentrating instead on products like palm oil and rubber. Similarly, the Germans in East Africa made a pretense of being most opposed to rulers like Bushiri, who were engaged in slave trading, but the Germans were equally hostile to African rulers with little interest in slaving. The common factor underlying the overthrow of African rulers in West, Central, North, and South Africa was that they stood in the way of European imperial needs. It was the only factor that mattered, with anti-slaving sentiments being at best superfluous and at worst calculated hypocrisy. So, of course, that's the thing too. It's like we have to just come to terms with Europe is going to look out for Europe. And us, saying, "Oh man, they're just looking out for their own needs." Well, that's what you're supposed to do. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Like if I go, I don't know, if I go to a bar, right? Let's say I want to meet women in a bar, right? Not to say that that's a good place to meet women, but this is an example, right? Or I go to a library. Let's say I go to a library, or let's say I go to a political meeting, right? I go to a political meeting, and I want a politically inclined woman, right? I'm probably gonna, if I'm looking for a woman, I'll probably gravitate to the best looking woman, right? And have myself a chat with her, private chat with her. And it might not be to the benefit of the other dudes out there looking for women. But like, that's not my plan. Like, that's my purpose. My purpose is not, oh, let me go help out these other brothers when I don't have. You know what I mean? My purpose is not, let me go help out these brothers when I don't have. Now, if I have a lady, sure, I'll be like, let me help you out with, let me help you out with another, like, I'll help out another brother. Okay? But if I don't have a woman, I'm going there to look for my needs. I'm supposed to. I don't like European imperialism. I don't like European colonialism. I don't like Europe. But I'm not going to sit up here and say, well, damn, why are they looking up for their interests? Because I don't know who else, that's the interest that they're supposed to look after. That's all I'm really saying. That those are the people that they're supposed to be looking after. I hope that's clear. Forecast saying Asante Sana. Let's see. Yeah, I hope that's clear. So I said King Leopold of Belgium also used the anti-slavery excuse to introduce into Congo forced labor and modern slavery. Besides, all Europeans had derived ideas of racial and cultural superiority between the 15th and 19th century, while engaged in genocide and enslavement of non-white people. Even Portugal, an impoverished and backward European nation in the imperialist era, could still presume that it had a destiny to civilize the natives in Africa. There is a curious interpretation of the scramble in African partition, which virtually amounts to saying that colonialism came about because of Africa's need rather than of Europe. Africa, they say, required European colonization if it were to advance beyond the stage it had reached in the late 19th century. Clearly, they did not appreciate that such a line of reasoning was suggesting that Africa would develop if it were given bigger doses of European concoction that had already started its underdevelopment. That it would develop if it lost the last remnants of its freedom of choice, which had clearly been seriously undermined by the pre-colonial trade. That it would develop if its economy became more integrated with Europe's on terms that were entirely dictated by Europe. Those implications and their fallacies would be plain to anyone who tries to understand the development process before making pronouncements on any particular epoch of human development in Africa. So, yeah, I mean, look, all warfare is based off of deception. Okay? I'm going to make a chapter, it's going to be about, be strategic, right? And it's like, all warfare is based off of deception. European is at war with you. Okay? Especially when we're talking about Europe and Africa. The European is, or even more so when we talk about what war is, you got to go after your needs, but you have to be deceptive about it. It's like you want a woman, I don't know, I keep going back to women thing, but I guess I got women on my mind, right? But like, you want a woman to live with you, for 50 plus years. Is that good for her? I don't know. You don't know. But because you need a woman to live with you for 50 years or what have you, right? You're going to go about trying to convince her. You don't know what's best for her. You don't even know what's best for yourself, let's say. But you're going to try to convince her. You know, and if you go to her, well, I don't know what's good for you. I don't, I don't know what's good for you. Like think about it this way. I mean, the only brothers right here now, but think about it this way. You go to a woman, and you tell her, podcast says you wouldn't put me on with her, right? I'm just saying, right? I mean, like if I don't got nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like I know they say it's no fun if the homies can't have none, but if I don't got nothing, you know what I'm saying? I'm not sharing no, you know what I'm saying? All right, but anyway, but what I'm saying is this: if you go to a woman, like so, we got two brothers here, two brilliant brothers here. So these brothers know. You go to a woman and you say, "Girl, I don't know. I don't know if I'm the right guy for you." Right? You say, "I don't know if I'm the right guy for you. I don't know. Like, I don't really know what's gonna happen in the future. 50 years is kind of a long time. We can probably take it day by day, but it probably won't even be ideal for either of us if we were, involved with each other, right? If you go and tell a woman that, right, versus if you tell a woman, girl, I'm gonna give you the best life you could possibly have, you and I together, that's all we have. 50 years of nonstop love, we're not gonna fight. Everything's gonna be peachy. Everything's gonna be rosy. Everything's good. Like, which of those two guys is going to get the girl? Which of those two MOs will work for you? Because one of them is honest. You don't know what the future has to tell. You know what I'm saying? Like we were talking about this in Shoot the Breeze yesterday. We don't know what the climate change is going. Like, we don't know what's happening with climate change. We don't know if the freaking planet's gonna burn us up. We don't know if we're gonna get nuked and we're gonna have to run for our lives. We don't know if me living in, we don't know. But you don't go to a woman, I don't know what's gonna happen. But you tell her, hey, sweetie, you and me, the world, you and me against the world, we gonna make it. And that's what it is. So I mean, yeah, when the European tells us, ah man, this is gonna be good for you if I take your shit. Like, yeah, of course he's gonna lie. And it's not that, like, I'm not saying that we lie to women when we say so on and so forth, but we don't really know. This white man probably knows that he's not helping you out, but the question becomes, why in the world would the European want to help you out anyway? He doesn't even know you. You know what I mean? like he doesn't even know you. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't internet at this point in time. Okay, there wasn't internet, there wasn't Wikipedia, there wasn't anything. These white boys were just hanging around on a ship. These white boys, some of these white boys were just prisoners. They were just prisoners in jail. Then some sea captain, comes along and says, I need some crew. And then that was it. He just brought some prisoners over to Europe and to Africa and saw a bunch of different people. And he said, look, man, you guys got guns and they don't. That's it. He don't know you. He's not looking out for you. He was being his woman at home. He don't know. Like, come on. Anyway, Organic African Paradigm says Europe will look for Europe. I wouldn't do any less for my own people. Those Africans who fail to practice this philosophy are those who believe Europe should look after Europe. Exactly. And it's like they're gonna look after their own people not only, but it's also like they don't even know you. I mean, it's different. Like for instance, like if you said, hey, now let's say you got a white neighbor, right? If you were looking out for your white neighbor that you have for 20 years, that would make a lot of sense. You know what I mean? You had this neighbor for 20, because even Toussaint Louverture did that. Real talk. Toussaint, and I don't agree with him for this, but I could understand why he did it. He was defending his plantation at the beginning of the Haitian Revolution. I wouldn't do that shit. No way. But he was doing that. And it's like that makes a little sense because he knew those people. He probably didn't know. Like I don't think he thought the Haitian Revolution was gonna pop off as it did. Maybe I'll give him that benefit of the doubt. That said, though, yeah, like he knew that. Hey, just get the plate and put it over there, right? So he like what I'm saying is that makes a little more sense. You defending your own
Like you defending the people you know. Okay? But if you don't know these people, why would you defend them? Like what European you know, or what person you know? And I mean by not know them, I want to say, like, cause even in that sense, I would say this. Like, for instance, if I go to Africa, you might say, well, Oni, you don't know anybody there, so are you saying that you wouldn't defend them? Well, look, I have the internet, and I'm black. You know what I mean? And times have changed in a sense, right? What we're talking about when we talk about people 400 years ago is like they really didn't know anything about Africa. Like when we say, oh yeah, Africa's known as dark continent to Europeans, like that's not hyperbole, right? They really did not know anything about Africa, or the little they knew about Africa was very, very minuscule. Sure, they knew that you could find gold. Sure, they knew that you could, what I mean? Like they knew they could find gold. You know, like there's just so and it's like, who knew that you could find gold? Because most of them were illiterates. Most of them were going there for their own self-interest, and that's like, we just have to process that nobody's like when I travel to Africa, for instance, it's like 23 hours on a plane. There were no planes back then, and that's a plane. I don't know if y'all know how fast planes move, but planes move, I want to say 10 times faster than cars. Actually, I feel like, let me see how fast a plane, because I don't know how fast cars move really. I mean, no, we know how fast are planes. But long story short, it takes you like typically they go 550 to 600 miles per hour. So yeah, 10 times the speed of a car, right? And of course, cars are super fast, and this is 10 times the speed of a fast car. You know what I mean? Like you don't even. So I would say 15 times the speed of a car, right? Because you're not really driving 55 miles per hour unless you're like on a highway that requires it. My point though is that it takes 23 hours. I'm not going to. Most people are like, ew, I'm not taking no 23 hours flight, right? These people are on a ship for 3 damn months. For 3 damn months. You have to pack a whole bunch of resources for 3 damn months. Meals, so on and so forth. You have to live with a bunch of dudes for 3 damn months. You think that they're doing that for your interest? All right. Anyway, let's go back to the paper. So there's a curious interpretation of the. Oh, did I read that? Curry did not appreciate that such a line of reasoning was suggesting that Africa would develop if it has bigger dose. I thought I read that. Maybe it's a repeat page. I don't know. Clearly, I do not appreciate that such a line of reasoning was suggesting that Africa would develop if it were given bigger doses of European concoction that had already started its underdevelopment. That it would develop if it lost the last remnants of its freedom of choice, which had clearly been seriously undermined by the pre-colonial trade. That it would develop if the economy became more integrated with Europe's on terms that were entirely dictated by Europe. Those implications and their fallacies would be plain to anyone who tries to understand the development process before making pronouncements on any particular epoch of human development in Africa. Throughout the 14th century, African rulers were displaying a great initiative in pursuit of the broadest forms of cultural contact with Europe. In the case of West Africa, that meant seeking substitutes for trades and slaves. Dahomey, one of the most embroiled in slave trading, was among those states that used many of the last years of its independence to find a healthy basis for cultural exchange with Europeans. So, in 1850, the reigning Dahomeyan king Gezo proclaimed an edict whereby all young oil palms. I mean, like we have to think about what I just said. You're not traveling for 3 damn months without any of your own self-interest. And you think about it too, like, even if you're talking about, like, actually, I can tell you all this. There was this woman who was trying to talk to me. Or I was talking to this woman, and she was kind of in another country, a nearby country, but another country. And I would say to myself, I want to meet this woman But the way how she was talking, it seemed like we were just gonna date. So I was gonna travel to another country, and there was nothing was guaranteed. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, part of me was like, I'm not gonna go. You know what I mean? Like part of me was like, this is not a high priority trip. If I'm just gonna, possibly buy her dinner. Now maybe that's not what it was gonna be, but the way how the talking, the flirting was, it seemed like it's not. It wasn't guaranteed. And it's like, I get it. Maybe a lady would not guarantee anything, so on and so forth. But it's like, I'm not taking a guaranteed, 12-hour trip. You know what I'm saying? I'm not taking a guaranteed 12-hour trip for, to buy a woman dinner. And be like, well, if things didn't work out, we'll have a nice day. Like, no, I mean, if I'm gonna date a woman, right? It's gonna be like a 30-minute trip. You know what I mean? But again, this is not. And that's me as an individual saying, I don't want to do no 12-hour trip for without my own self-interest. These white boys traveled for 3 months. For 3 months. Of course they're looking out for their own interest. Like, they have families. They have friends. They said, oh, we're going to travel for 3 damn months. And we sitting by saying, well, I mean, they're looking out for their own self-interest. They're not even looking to develop us. Yeah, of course not. I mean, look, I don't agree with them. I don't like them. But I also can't see how we would think that they would travel for 3 months to develop us. Like that should have never made any sense. That should have never made any sense. Like if a dude says, if a woman says, hey, I'm in let's say you're in New York, she's like, I'm in Texas. I'm in Texas, come take a road trip to my house. Take a road trip to my house so you could help me build so you can help me put up my my bookshelf. Right? You could do that. But if you go, you take a road trip for 12 hours and all you do is put up her bookshelf and then she says, have a nice day, good for you. I don't think a lot of people would do that, though. Like, if you would do that, that's fine with that's okay. Like, you're good. You're a good person. You know what I'm saying? like you're a good person. I mean, this is not your relative or nothing. This is just like a sexy woman. You're a good person. But like, a lot of dudes aren't gonna do that. And that's the thing. Like, when we talk about a sexy woman, like, Africa, gold galore, tin galore, rubber trees galore, like, everything just abundant. And y'all want them to go over there to, okay, well, we'll fix up these houses for you. Okay. I mean, if you think that, and of course, like, Europeans are not gonna do that. Like, Europeans are not good people. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, like, yeah. Like, if you would do that, you would say, yeah, I'll fix up your house. I don't care if you got, rubber. I don't care if you got gold. I don't care if you got tin. I'll fix up your houses because I'm a good person. Well, good for you, man. Shit. You know what I'm saying? But like, these Europeans are not good people. Like, they are not good people. Like, not even remotely. I just want people to understand that Europeans are not good people. All right. So in 1850, the reigning Dahomean king Gezo proclaimed an edict whereby all young oil palms were to be freed from parasites surrounding them, and several penalties were to be imposed for cutting palm trees. Gezo who ruled from 1818 to 1857, so that's about 39 years, was a reformer, and he made sincere efforts to meet criticisms of his policies by groups such as missionaries and anti-slaving campaigners, but it soon became clear that Europeans were not bent on seeing Dahomey reemerge as a strong state. What made you think that? But were rather creating excuses and subjective conditions to justify their proposed colonization of the people of Dahomey. Under those circumstances, the last Dahomean monarch, Glele, fell back on his capital at Abome and pursued the policies which he considered most consistent with the dignity and independence of Dahomey. Glele raided Abeokuta, which contained converts who were already British protected persons. He told the French to get the hell out of Porto Novo, and he generally resisted until defeated militarily by the French in 1889. African groups who had little or nothing to do with slave exports also intensified their efforts to integrate into a wider world in the 19th century. Gungunhana, the Nguni ruler of Gaza in Mozambique, asked for a Swiss missionary doctor and maintained him at his court for several years until the Portuguese conquered his kingdom in 1895. After the Portuguese imposed colonial rule, it was a long time before Africans saw another doctor. Well, yeah, you shouldn't have seen the doctor at the beginning, but anyway. It is particularly instructive to turn the example of Egypt under Muhammad Ali. Wait, this guy must be Superman, because ain't no way, right? Forecast says copper and lithium abundant. Yeah, just copper and lithium, and we're just like, come over and, we'll give you a good meal, like, we'll give you a good meal and you go back home. You go back on that you go back on that 3-month trip after a good meal. Like, anybody's gonna do that. Anyway, so Muhammad Ali, I told you this guy could fight Superman, because ain't no way. But anyway, Muhammad Ali, who ruled from 1805 to 1849, capitalist Europe had left. By the way, I know it's not the same box. Who ruled from 1805 to 1849, capitalist Europe had left feudal North Africa behind over the course of the 17th and 18th century. Muhammad Ali was aware of that and consciously aimed at catching up with Europe. He instituted a series of reforms, the most important of which were of an economic nature. Egypt grew and manufactured its own cotton, and it made glass, paper, and other industrial goods. Egypt was not to be used as a dumping ground for European goods, which would undermine local industry, so they protective tariffs walls were set up against Egypt's infant industry. See that tariffs? We were talking about that in the page I was writing. That did not mean that Egypt became isolated from the rest of the world. On the contrary, Muhammad Ali borrowed experts from Egypt, and he increased Egypt's foreign trade. So you shouldn't have done that. But I mean, you should trade out, but again, you want to buy money, right? So anyway, so the ideals of Muhammad Ali could be related in the idiom of modern social science as being the creation of a viable, self-propelling economy to provide the basis for national independence. Such ideals were diametrically opposed to the needs of European capitalism. British and French industrialists wanted to see Egypt not as a textile manufacturer, but as a producer of raw cotton for export and an importer of European manufactures. European financiers wanted Egypt to be a source of investment, and in the second half of the 18th century, they turned the Sultan of Egypt into an international beggar who mortgaged the whole of Egypt to international monopoly financiers. Finally, European statesmen wanted Egyptian soil to serve as a basis for exploiting India and Arabia. Therefore, the Suez Canal was dug out of Egyptian soil by Egyptians, but it was owned by Britain and France, who then extended political domination, I'm saying words so wrong, over Egypt and Sudan. So, yeah. I mean, again, I don't like these imperialists. I think the imperialists are bad people. I think the capitalists are bad, obviously. Obviously. But, that's what they're going to do. I mean, it doesn't make any sense if Britain and France said, we don't want the Suez Canal. We don't want to engage with India and Arabia from the Western Hemisphere, from their west. We don't want that. We want you, Egypt, to do this. Like, it just wouldn't make any sense. And I get that we just want them to have their hands off, but I think, it's like, yeah, we want that, but like, what do they want? And that's what it really becomes to. It's like, what do you want for yourself? Yeah, that's the conversation we're having right now on Twitter, or not Twitter, but X. We're having it about X on the conversation regarding Haiti. It's like Kenya was recently appealed to lead a multinational force, blah 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 blah, and so a lot of people are like, "Ew, no, not Kenya, bring us Russia," or like they bring us nothing, but it's still like, come on. Anyway, so education is undeniably one of the facets of European life, which had grown most appreciably during the capitalist epoch. Though education and extensive use of the written word, Europeans were in a position to pass on to the others the scientific principles of the material world, which they had discovered, as well as the bodies of varied philosophical reflections on man and society. Africans were quick to appreciate advantages deriving from a literate education. So again, the Africa did also have some literary advantages, particularly in Timbuktu, through the quote unquote Arabs, or the quote unquote Muslims. But yeah, but again, this is another thing to remember, that a lot of the Europeans that traveled to Africa were illiterate, So Africans were quick to appreciate advantages driving. So in Madagascar, but this is Eastern Africa kind of. But anyway, in Madagascar, the Merina Kingdom did a great deal to sponsor reading and writing. They used their own language and an Arabic script, and they welcomed the aid of European missionaries. That consciously borrowing from all relevant sources was only possible when they had the freedom to choose. And you see what I'm saying? Like the freedom to choose. You want these Europeans, but you don't want the Europeans to have self-interest. You want to have self-interest. You don't want the Europeans to have self-interest. And that's where it becomes the problem, because again, like I said, these guys are not like the Arabs are right next door to Eastern Africa. Okay, they're right next door to Eastern Africa. The Europeans are very, very far from Eastern Africa. They're very, very far from Western Africa. But anyway, it is what it is. The conscious borrowing, so colonization, far from springing from Malagasy needs, actually erected a barrier to the attainment of the modernization initiated by the Merina kings in the 1860s and 1870s. A similar example can be found in the history of Tunisia before the axis of partition fell. Sorry, but again, Madagascar, like most people, I don't know if you guys, if you're familiar with the map of Africa, Cassandra Cheek says, Jumbo, dada. Alright, so, if you guys are familiar with where Madagascar is, I mean, I know you are, but, it's so far off of mainland Africa, it's almost like, what are you even talking about Madagascar for? I mean, I get that it is in Africa, or I guess that we consider it a part of Africa, but it's what do you, and right now, even I want people to know too that it's not even it's not even I don't know, I just wouldn't use it as an example. It just seems a little bit too obscure a reference. Let me see if this works. Where is this? Jumbo. Oh, here. So this is not the best map in the world, but I don't know if I can zoom in. But this is not the best map in the world, but this is Africa, right? This is Tanzania over here. Zanzibar is over here. This is Madagascar, right? Just to give you guys some more. So, this is Egypt, obviously. This is I think this map is wrong, but I don't know who did this map, honestly, because I feel like South Sudan and Ethiopia might have been switched or something. I'm not sure, but my point is this: this is the Arab world, this is the Indians. Madagascar is actually half one of these countries. I can't remember which, but some Asians are half of Madagascar. But just oh man, this is what happened in Madagascar. And then he says Tunisia, which is, I want to say around here, honestly, or maybe it's here. I'm not sure. But it's one of those countries that, really has, less related to us. But anyway, but I think I'm just showing my New York geography skills, because we don't really study geography here. Let me see the comments. Forecast says, "Hey, Cassandra, great job last night. You were going in, yeah." Did I switch the windows or no? I don't know if I switched windows. All right, yeah. So let's just keep going. I think we're almost finished too. Where is my okay? So Africa, we're quick to appreciate. Yeah. So Madagascar and Tunisia, so on and so forth. Right. So in many parts of the world, capitalism in its imperialist form accepted that some measures of political sovereignty should be left in the hands of the local population. This was so in Eastern Europe, like you're just going all over the world, in Latin America, and to a more limited extent in China. However, European capitalists came to the decision that Africa should be directly colonized. There's evidence to suggest that such a course of action was not entirely planned. Britain and France, up to the 1850s and 1860s, would have preferred to divide Africa into informal spheres of influence. That means that they could have been a gentleman's agreement that, say, Nigeria would be exploited by the British merchants while Senegal would be exploited by Frenchmen. At the same time, both Englishmen and Frenchmen would trade in a minor way in each other's informal empires. But firstly, there was a disagreement over who should suck which pieces of Africa, especially since Germany wanted to join the grabbing. And secondly, the moment that one European power declared an area of Africa as a protectorate or a colony, it put up tariffs against the European traders of other nationalities, and in turn forced their rivals to have colonies and discriminatory tariffs. One thing led to another, and soon 6 European capitalist nations were falling over each other to establish direct political rule over particular sections of Africa. Make no mistake about it, gentlemen like Karl Peters, Livingstone, Stanley, Henry Johnson, de Brazza, General Gordon, and their masters in Europe were literally scrambling for Africa. They barely avoided a major military conflagration. Okay. In addition to the factors that caused the chain reaction of the scramble as described above, Europeans were also racially motivated to seek political domination over Africa. The 19th century was one in which white racism was most violently and openly expressed in capitalist societies, with the USA as a focal point, and with Britain taking the lead among the Western European capitalist nations. Britain accepted granting dominion status to its old colonies of white settlers in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, but it withdrew self-government from the West Indies when the white planters were ousted from the legislative assemblies by black or brown people. As far as Africa is concerned, Englishmen violently opposed black self-government, such as the Fante Confederation on the Gold Coast in the 1860s. They also tried to erode the authorities of black Creoles in Sierra Leone. In 1874, when Fora Bay College sought and obtained affiliation with Durham University, the Times newspaper declared that Durham should next affiliate with the London Zoo. What? Pervasive and vicious racism was present in imperialism as a variant independent of the economic rationality that initially gave birth to racism. It was economics that determined that Europe should invest in Africa and control the continent's raw materials and labor. It was racism which confirmed the decision that the form of control should be direct colonial rule. So I'm going to do something really... So my next book is probably not going to sell well. It's probably not going to sell well. Because I'm going to say black people, like, we know how I say be parsimonious, be whatever. I'm going to say be racist. A lot of people don't want to hear that, but if you're being honest about the human condition, if you're being honest about race as a subspecies of a wider species known as Homo sapien, right? If you're being honest about these kind of things, you have to realize that, yeah, you should look out for your race before you look out for another race. And that's what the Europeans are doing. So when you say, hey, you know what? The Europeans offered Canada self-government. The Europeans offered New Zealand and Australia and America self-government. But they didn't offer Jamaica or Haiti or Trinidad or what have you, Bahamas or Barbados. If they say that they're not going to offer black people self-government, it makes a lot of sense. The trouble with the quote-unquote socialist narrative is, one, this anti-racism, which doesn't make any damn sense. But two, it's this idea that other people should not look out for themselves, whereas we should look out for ourselves. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you think you should look out for yourself, right? Other people will look out for themselves too. And they're not waiting for you to tell them to look out for themselves. They're going to look out for themselves. No, the white people do not want black people to be their equal competitors. As a black person, I don't want white people being my competitor or equal competitors. But the difference between me and white people is that white people have an infrastructure to be ahead of me, and I don't have that infrastructure. Because I'm dealing with a bunch of black people who do not want to be competitive. who do not want to be realistic when it comes to what's happening in the world. So Brother Bakari is here. Shout out to Brother Bakari. This is peace and black power to Oni in the chat. He says sorry he's late, but he has to watch the replay. You're not late, man. You're on time. You on CPT time, right? So you know it is. We are African. Forecast says, "What up, Bakari?" All right. So yeah. So we go back to the reading. Hopefully we wait. How long have we been on? It feels pretty quick though. I ain't gonna hold you. Yeah, hour. It's not bad. So Africans everywhere fought against alien political rule and had to be subdued by superior force. But a sizable minority did insist that their trade connection with Europe should remain unbroken, for that was a measure of extent to which they were already dependent on Europe. The most dramatic illustration of that dependence was the determination with which some Africans fought the end of the European slave trade. So again, well, yeah, you have some people who are like dependency on another people is slavery. A lot of people don't understand that. This is only accepted. Like it's not slavery if it's like in your personal life. Like for instance, my son might be dependent on me. Like in your family, it's not slavery. Like my son's dependent on me, but he's not my slave. Obviously. But or like let's say if I have a wife, she might be dependent on me, but she's not my slave, right? But when you're talking about nations to nations, yeah, you don't become dependent on another person or another nation. So anyway, for most European capitalist states, the enslavement of Africans had served this purpose by the middle of the 19th century. But for those Africans who dealt in captives, the abrupt termination of the trade at any given point was a crisis of the greatest magnitude. In many areas, major social changes had taken place to bring the particular region effectively into the service of the European slave trade, one of the most significant being the rise of domestic slavery and various forms of caste and caste subjugation. Yeah, so domestic slavery is something that, is still prevalent in Africa. African rulers and traders who found their social existence threatened by the earliest legal edicts, such as the 1807 British Act against the trade in slaves, found ways of making contact with Europeans who still wanted slaves. In sub-Saharan Africa, and especially in West Africa, the export of slaves declined most rapidly, where Europeans were prepared to buy other commodities. As soon as inhabitants of any region found that they had a product which Europeans were accepting in place of former slave trades, those inhabitants put tremendous effort into organizing the alternative, namely ivory, rubber, palm product, groundnuts, etc. Once more, the efforts demonstrated the determination of a small but decisive proportion of Africans, the determination based on the desire to obtain European trade goods, many of which had ceased to be mere curiosities or luxuries, and were regarded instead as necessities. So you see, back where I said, if you want to be wealthy, you buy necessities first, money second, and luxuries last. The trouble that happened in Africa is that we started buying luxuries first. And we see that even in our own communities today. You gotta like for instance, you're poor. Let's say you're poor, right? You're poor. What do you need to get to improve your life? Luxury clothing. Okay? That doesn't make sense. Right? That doesn't make sense. You should not go for luxury clothing before you go for your necessities, for having your own home and for having a good occupation, whether that's a good job or a good business, right? You should focus on getting a good job and a good business. Then you could dress in your luxury clothing. Focus on having it, because I tell you, like the things that's going on in my life. This dude owes me how much money, right? What does he do? Goes on vacation. He goes on vacation, comes back from vacation, and they lose their business in a sense, right? And now I'm sitting around like, where's my damn money? But I can't get my money because they're like, I don't got no money because my business failed. It's like, well, why did you go on vacation if you owe somebody money? One. Two, why would you go on vacation if your business is not that secure? And so now my business is being harmed. But of course I don't want to cry about that. Here I am crying. But I don't want to cry about that. So, not that I would cry, but I'm just saying. All the same, but like that's the thing. It's like, but that's what happens in Africa. We're like, hey, look, we want to get luxuries, we want to get necessities. Oh no, we got fucked. We're never buying money. We're just buying luxuries. Now we got screwed, and we don't take that accountability. You know, we're gonna say, oh, it's the Europeans' fault. He came around and he sold us luxuries. Well, like it's not his like. Matter of fact, I'll show you guys this. This is actually a pretty funny thing. Let me show. Let me see if I can pull it up. So I don't know if you guys know. I have this website. It's called African Blood Siblings. It's a old, like I had it 10 years ago, so it's pretty cool. This is my website. It's my thing. Oh, back in the day, right? So you go on here and you go Malcolm ecology quotes, right? So basically, understanding our ecology with Malcolm X, right? You go to this page, you open it up, and there's a whole bunch of quotes from the autobiography of Malcolm X that relate to economics, right? And the bold is just pay attention to this thing. Basically right here, like this is interesting. It says the bulk of Negroes were either on welfare or they starved. He's talking about in Lansing, Philadelphia, or whatever, right? Not Philadelphia. Well, I think so actually. Pennsylvania, right? Lansing, Pennsylvania, maybe, or Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, right? But anyway, so one of the things that I really liked was this one. Okay, so this is on page 210, depending on what copy you have, which is probably the same copy, right? He says, "Look, I was seeing in real life that at some point, the same point made in a joke that during the 1964 presidential campaign, Jet magazine reported that Senator Barry Goldwater had told somewhere." So this was a guy who was trying to become president. He obviously didn't. 1964, he's probably lost against Johnson, maybe, I don't know, but who knows? But anyway, guy's running for president, and he decides to tell a joke, and the joke is, he's like, it was that a white man, a white man, a Negro, and a Jew were given one wish each. The white man asked for securities, the Negro asked for a lot of money, and the Jew asked for some imitation jewelry and that colored boy's address. You know? And actually, I guess we could read this. So he says, in all my years in the streets, I've been looking at the exploitation for the first time I really saw and understood. Now I watch brothers entwining themselves in the economic clutches of the white man who went home every night with another bag of money, driven out of the ghetto. I saw the money, instead of helping the black man, was going to help enrich their white merchants who usually lived in exclusive areas where a black man had better not be caught unless he was working there for somebody white. So, sorry, I don't know why. But anyway, so that wasn't what I wanted to. I didn't really. That wasn't that informative. But this is it. He's like, look, even black people in America, and this is not me saying it. This is not even Malcolm X saying it. This is a white man that Malcolm X happened to observe and say, yeah, I agree. In 1960s, before even all hip hop, even before hip hop was a thing, he's saying black people like to just wear imitation jewelry, like to waste their wealth on luxuries, even fake luxuries. And you notice he's like, oh, well, it's the Jews who picked up on it. Like, oh, that's a way to get money from these from these black people. Whereas the white man says, hey, look, there's a way to get money off of white folk with securities. The Jews like, hey, I can find money from these black folk because black folk are easy to let go of their money. And we have to process this because we're talking about building wealth for our people. I don't even know if I should include this in my book because I'm trying not to. Somebody asked me not to quote too many other people. I don't know if I should include this joke in my book, but it is very relevant, very related to what we're talking about when we're talking about building wealth. You know? And we don't seem to get that you can screw yourself over based off of your spending habits. Like you can, as an individual, screw yourself over, and nations can screw themselves over. And I understand we don't want to blame our own people, and I'm not blaming our own people. But I also want us to understand wealth does not come to those who do not let's say quote unquote want it, you know, or are not willing to pay the cost for it. Because I was actually telling this brother, matter of fact, this. I think it would have been like on a given day, I may spend $10 on my entire food cost for me and my son. $10. You understand? So, you know, that means that I'm not eating perfectly well. You know what I'm saying? Right? Because I just, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you heat up something in the air fryer, but then you could have an air fryer because you didn't spend $30-$40 on your meal for the day. You get what I'm saying? Like there's a cost to having money. There's a risk for having money. There's a loss for having money. You know, I have like if you look at how, like I'll tell you, sometimes I get, you know, sometimes you see what other people are eating and you're like, damn, whew, wish I had that, right? But then, you know, sometimes those same people don't have any money. But anyway, we're gonna keep going. So the first 4 centuries of Afro-European trade, in a very real sense, represents the roots of African underdevelopment. The first 4 centuries represent the roots. Okay, so colonialism flourished rapidly from Europeans' viewpoint because several of its features were already rooted in Africa in the preceding period. One of the most decisive features of the colonial system was the presence of Africans serving as economic, political, and cultural agents for the European colonialists. These agents or compradors were already serving European interests in the pre-colonial period. The impact of trade with Europe had reduced many African rulers to the status of middlemen for European trade. It had raised ordinary Africans to the same middleman commercial role and has created a new trading group of mixed blood, the children of Europeans or Arab fathers. Those types, these are mulattoes, can be referred to as compradors, as they played a key role in extending European activity from the coast into the hinterland as soon as Europeans thought of taking over political power. One outstanding example of the above is the way that the French colonialists used Africans and mulattoes on the Senegalese coast as agents for the spread of French control for thousands of miles into areas now covered by Senegal, Mali, Chad, Upper Volta, and Niger. Those particular blacks and mulattoes were living in the trading ports of Gorée, Dakar, St. Louis, and Rufisque, and they had long-standing links with Atlantic trade. Africans conducting trade on behalf of Europeans were not merely commercial agents, but also cultural agents, since inevitably they were heavily influenced by European thought and values. The search for European education began in Africa before the colonial period. Coastal, and again, education is a necessity. So do not go to another people for your necessities. Coastal rulers and trade, and this is why, like I said, you have to talk. We have to. This is why I'm writing this book, because it's not going to reach our ancestors. Okay, but it could possibly reach somebody who can do something. You know, coastal rulers and traders recognized the necessity to penetrate more deeply into the way of life of the white man who came across the sea. The mulatto sons of white traders and the sons of African rulers were the ones who made the greatest effort to learn the white ways. This helped them to conduct business more effectively. One Sierra Leone ruler in the 18th century explained that he wished to learn book to be rogue as good as the white man, and there were many others who saw the practical advantage of literacy. However, the educational process also meant imbibing values which led to further African subjugation. One West African educated in the early period wrote a PhD thesis in Latin justifying slavery. This is not surprising. The Reverend Thomas Thompson was the first European educator of the Gold Coast, and he wrote in 1778 a pamphlet entitled The African Trade for Negro Slaves, shown to be consistent with the principle of humanity and the laws of revealed religion. So again, European educators saying, hey, the African trade is consistent with the principles of humanity and the laws of revealed. And you see this, he says, look, an African applying for a PhD wrote in Latin justifying slavery. You see what I'm saying? This is why, you know, I wanted to get my PhD and then I didn't want it. I said no, I didn't. You know, I said no, I don't want a PhD anymore, because I was like, I don't want to put that doctor on my name, so that black folk think, oh, a PhD is a good thing. Anyway, but a lot of these Negroes got PhDs, and you know they are like I said, we were having a discussion on what should happen with Haiti, like what should be done with Haiti, and somebody said, man, forget Kenya, but I would wish that Russia showed up. And look, I'm not even against Russia, but I mean, it's just like, it just writes itself. It just writes itself. Matron's here. Shout out to the matron. Matron says, middlemen make the money. Be a middleman. That's a whole thesis. There you go. Right? Middlemen make the money. You know, that's why I was saying too. It's like you have to follow the law of gain. You know, I feel like I should have put that in my book too. But yeah, the middlemen make the money. And we have to come to terms with that. You know, we have to come to terms with that. Appreciate Matron for coming through. Matrix might come back and read some books to us. So we'll see, right? So one of the most striking features of 19th century West African history is the manner in which Africans returned from slavery under European masters and helped the establishment of colonial rule. This was especially true of Africans who returned from the West Indies and North America to Sierra Leone, or who were released from slave ships and landed in Sierra Leone. To a lesser extent, it also applied to Africans who were once in Brazil. Such individuals had assimilated capitalist values and, like most European missionaries, promoted the kind of activity that went along with colonial rule. In a rather different context, it can be argued that the Arabs of Zanzibar and the East Africans also transformed into agents of European colonialism. At the first, they resisted because European colonialism affected their own expansionist ambitions of the East Africans, but they soon came to an arrangement which gave Europeans the ultimate power. The Europeans reduced the small Arab clique into political and economic instruments of imperialism. European superiority over the Arabs in East and North and in the Middle East demonstrates conclusively modern imperialism is inseparable from capitalism and the role of slavery in the context of capitalism. The Arabs had acquired Africans as slaves for centuries, but they were exploited in a feudal context. African slaves in Arab hands became domestic soldiers and agricultural serfs. Whatever surplus they produced was not for reinvestment and multiplication of capital, as in the West Indian or North American slave systems, but for consumption by the feudal elites. Indeed, slaves were often maintained more for social prestige than for economic benefit. So again, this right here, reinvestment and multiplication of capital, that for some reason is the problem. But that is actually how you would develop wealth. And that's the formula that, like he says, even the Arabs didn't practice. You see what I'm saying? So when we talk about, because even when we talk about, because we say, hey, slavery brings wealth. Yeah, slavery does bring wealth, but if you do not manage your spending, right, if it's just for social prestige and you're not investing and multiplying your capital, you're not going to be wealthy. And that's the problem that we have in Africa, but that's also the problem. Like, I probably should even mention the Europeans surpassing the Arabs. You know? I should maybe even mention the Europeans surpassing the Arabs. Maybe I'll do that briefly. But anyway, so the major exception to the rule was the 19th century Zanzibar and Egypt under Muhammad Ali. In both those instances, African labor was being exploited to produce profit on a plantation basis, and this may also have applied to date palm production in Arabia. But Europe had already been exploiting African labor to maximize surplus for 3 centuries previously, and the contribution of which the plantation system made to the European capitalist development was so great that the Western Europe in the 19th century had engulfed the lesser exploitation of Zanzibar in Arabia and had secured a firm grasp of Egypt's economy after the death of Muhammad Ali. So, in 1849. In other words, the cloves, cotton, and date produced in Zanzibar, Egypt, and Arabia, respectively, previous to colonization, were already going to strengthen European trade and production. Eventually, it was no problem for the capitalist slave trader of Europe to extend political domination over the feudalist Arab slave traders and to use the latter as agents of colonialism in East Africa. So, when we talk about Zanzibar, realize we were actually talking about this yesterday on Shoot the Breeze. So he mentions who was running Egypt at the time. He doesn't mention Zanzibar. So Zanzibar was Htp. So this particular era, Brother Comjiverse gave a speech on. Gave a presentation on Htp, and he was giving it a description. And if you notice the years he's talking about, Htp was a terrible, slave raider, if you will, right? But Htp then took his capital and he made these palm production and all that kind of stuff in Zanzibar, right? Now Zanzibar, if you guys don't know, eventually the Zanzibar Revolution happened, and what the story that I heard was that the African population did an uprising against the Arabs because the Arabs kept messing with the African girls, kept messing with the children. They kept trying to, marry younger and younger girls, and the African population had enough at one point, right? That's the thing I heard when I was in college. There's a lot probably to read about it. I haven't yet read about it. What in the world is this? I just got a notification that I just got an important notification. But anyway, so returning to the question of indigenous. Returning to the question of indigenous African agents of European colonial rule in Africa, It should be recognized that Europeans recruited Africans to serve in the armies that actually conquered Africa in the bloody period from the 1880s through to the First Great War started by the Europeans in 1914. It is widespread characteristic of colonialism to find agents of repression from among the colonial victims themselves. Yet without the previous centuries of trade between Africa and Europe, it would have been impossible for Europeans to have so easily recruited the Ascaris, porters, etc., who made the colonial conquest possible. Now again, this is just speculation, but anyway. African residents of the Senegalese ports already, and it's speculation. It's like also like, who cares? You know, like, oh, it would have been impossible for them if they didn't colonize. Yeah, okay, but like, who cares? Like this happened. What are we gonna do now? You know, like, what are we going to do now? Like, what is actionable now? That's one of the troubles. Like I said, we're having this conversation on Twitter. I can't bring it up because I'm not logged on to Twitter on my computer. But we're having this conversation on Twitter, and of course I'm blacklisted, so that means you can't actually find my page if you're not logged on to Twitter. But anyway, we're having this conversation, and people are, I'm like, hey, what should we do about Haiti? Well, in 1920 in 2004, this is what happened to Haiti. And in 1943, this is what happened to Haiti. Okay, what should we do with Haiti in 2023? Well, in 2004, Haiti so on and so forth. And in 1993, Haiti, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what should we do in 2023? Well, in 2004, you know, and it's like guys, what should we do in 2023? That's all I want to know. I know what happened in 2004. I know what happened in 1903. I know what happened in 1801. I know. What should we do in 2023? Well, in 19... Anyway. And it's like, damn it. You know, but that's our people right now. Forecast says Dr. Oni. Yeah, okay. I said I couldn't because yeah, I just couldn't. It just like no. You know what I mean? Because we want white validation so much. Now, granted, I mean, would it have helped me out? Sure, but I can't succumb to. I can't promote white validation personally. I can't do it. But anyway, African residents of the Senegalese ports already referred to were the ones who were put in. No, referred to were the ones who were put in French army uniform and fought to establish French rule in the interior and other parts of the coast, such as Dahomey. When the British defeated Asante in 1874, they had in their forces African troops from the coastal towns around the Gold Coast forts. Those Africans had been in contact with Europeans for so long that ever since the 17th century they identified themselves as Dutch, Danish, or English, depending on whose fort gave them employment. They had fought battles for one European nation against another, and by the late 19th century it was an easy matter to get them to fight against fellow Africans on behalf of the conquering colonial powers of Britain. Can you imagine that, though? I mean, as much as I want to clown this for that, can you imagine you're in Africa? You're in Africa. You're just employed by the fort. And you think you're Dutch. And you think you're Danish. And you think you're English. And you're in Africa. That's crazy. Anyway. Because, like, even now, we have, we have black people in America who are like, I'm American. But it's like, okay, it makes a little sense. You are in America, right? You are an American citizen, in fact. Right? So it makes a little sense. You're not even in the Netherlands. And you call yourself a Dutch. Like, that don't even make any sense. Like there's no, but I mean, it is what it is. So in the Portuguese territories, the origins of the black, but I mean, that's also, I want to say this, that's also why I say nations are just social constructs. I mean, everybody says everything is a social construct, and everything kind of is. But even so, it's like, it gets to the point where you can believe that you're an English person without ever having been in England. That's crazy. In the Portuguese territories, the origins of the black colonial police and army also went back into the pre-colonial trade period. Around the forts of Luanda and Benguela in Angola and Lourenço, Marques and Bere, I'm trying to sound Latin, right? In Mozambique, there grew up communities of Africans, mulattoes, and even Indians who helped pacify large areas for the Portuguese after the Berlin Conference. Traders in Mozambique and in the rest of East, West, and Central Africa who had experience with Europeans previous to colonialism were the ones to provide porters to carry the heavy machine guns, cannons, and support equipment. They were the ones who provided the would-be European colonialists with the information and military intelligence that facilitated conquest, and they were the interpreters who were the voice of the Europeans on African soil. Of course, it is true that many Africans who had nothing to do with pre-colonial trade also allied themselves with European newcomers. In that respect, the gap in levels of political organization between Europe and Africa were very crucial. The development of political unity in the form of large states was proceeding steadily in Africa, but even so, at the time of the Berlin Conference, Africa was still a continent of a large number of socio-political groupings who had not arrived at a common purpose. Therefore, it was easy for the European intruder to play the classic game of divide and conquer. In that way, certain Africans became unwilling allies of Europe. Many African rulers sought a European alliance to deal with their own African neighbors with whom they were in conflict. Few of those rulers appreciated the implication of their action. Exactly. You have to be racist. If you're not racist, you're going to get fucked over. If you're not racist, you're going to be fucked over. And the thing is this, we're still seeking European alliances. I kind of want to show you guys this tweet, but again, like I said, I can't even pull it up. But basically, it goes like, Kenya is requested, the Kenyan foreign minister says, oh, thanks for being, I'm requested as a, to lead a multinational effort against, multinational effort in Haiti so that we can quell, so that we can, send some police over there to train the police in Haiti to bring better stability there. That's what they said. The socialists are mad. And I get it. It's because, a part of it is they have to go under the UN. And if you read Nkrumah's writing, you're just like, ew, the UN is fucking disgusting. Right? That said, I was like, what do you want people to do? Because if you see what's happening in Haiti, you think something has to be done. Right? So what do you want them to do? Nobody comes up with an answer. The two loudest responses is, what if Russia came in? Right? Which is another European alliance. Right? And the other answer is, let the Haitians do it on their own. And by the way, the Haitians are suffering for 2 years now. Since the assassination of their president. They were suffering before that. But now they're suffering majorly. And the two solutions are, well, either we get the Russians, like no to the Kenyans, because Kenya is America apparently, right? That's what they're telling. They're telling me Kenya is, when you see Kenya, just see it's U.S. and that's like a quote from them, right? So not to Kenya, which is an African country, but to Russia, which is not an African country, or let Haiti handle itself when Haiti clearly can. But anyway, but like that's the world we live in. That's the world we live in. Let's just keep going though. So yeah, many African rulers sought a European alliance to deal with their own African neighbors with whom they were in conflict. Few of those rulers appreciated the implications of their actions. They could not know that Europeans had come to stay permanently. They could not know that Europeans were out to conquer, not some, but all Africans. This partial inadequate view of the world was itself a testimony of African underdevelopment relative to Europe, which in the last 19th century was self-confidently seeking domination in dominion in part of the globe. So again, if you're not racist, you're not going to pick up on this. If you look at white people as not a monolith, you're not going to pick up on it. Political divisions in Africa were no evidence of innate inferiority or backwardness. That was a state in which the continent had then found itself, a point along a long road that others had traversed and along which Africa was moving. Commercial impact of Europe slowed down the process of political amalgamation and expansion, in contrast to the way trade with Africa strengthened Europe's nation states. When European capitalism took the form of imperialism and started to subjugate Africa politically, the normal political conflicts of the pre-capitalist African situation was transformed into weakness, which allowed the Europeans to set up their colonial domination. Altogether, it is very clear that to understand the coming of colonialism into Africa, one has to consider the previous historical evolution of both Africa and Europe, and in particular, one has to consider ways in which their trade contacts influenced the two continents mutually, so that what was called pre-colonial trade proved to be a preparatory stage for the era of colonial rule. It is widely accepted that Africa was colonized because of its weakness. The concept of weakness should be understood to embrace military weakness and inadequate economic capacity, as well as certain political weaknesses, namely the incompleteness of the establishment of nation states, which left the continent divided, and the low level of consciousness concerning the world at large, which had already been transformed into a single system by the expansion of capitalist relations. So again, Africa was weak. And the thing is this, it's like, when the strong dominate the weak, you can blame the strong. You can blame the strong. But like, what good is that? What you need to do is you need to tell the weak, like for instance, all right, like for instance, my son. My son doesn't go to the public school system, but let's say he did, right? Um, Actually, he's a big guy. He's a big kid, but let's say he were a small kid, right? A kid larger than him, you could blame the kid larger than him for pushing him around, right? You can, but you would have to tell you'd have to tell this boy. I mean, obviously, I could obviously intervene on my own, but let's say I can't intervene, right? You would have to tell this kid, strengthen up. You know, or even like, let's say we talk about video games. There's competitive video games. You can get your butt kicked in those competitive video games, and not because the other person is smarter than you or whatever. They play the game more than you. They read books on the game, or they read blogs and watch YouTube videos on how to be better at this game. They play the game when you're not playing the game. You know, when you're out on a date, they're playing the game. But anyway, we'll just go. So this is the end of the chapter. So sections of this chapter, section 3 of this chapter deal with the African society in a continuation of chapter 2, and general books cited there are also relevant in this context. More African writers are involved in this recent pre-colonial period, which is of course one aspect of national struggle. There are also more and better monographs on given areas and subjects, but the coming of imperialism had not yet been seriously pursued from the African viewpoint, and there was a marked absence of theory linking together the numerous facts that are now well established about events taking place in Africa between 1500 and 1885. Now again, what happened before 1500? You know, the Arabs were in Africa for 700 years before this, and they were in Europe for 700 years before this. So what happened? J. Webster and A. Barnhan, The Revolutionary Years, West Africa since 1800. Davidson and J. E. Mina, The Growth of African Civilization, East and Central Africa to the late 7th century. These two should be added to the list of general texts which provide regional surveys over a long period of time. They have the advantage of being coherent interpretation and not just collected essays, right? So now he's talking about his own book, because he's Walter Rodney. He's like, West Africa and the African Slave Trade. I'm going to do the same thing, by the way. I'm going to do the same thing. Y'all going to see in my next book, I'm going to be like, oh, by the way, there's some good books to read. Anyway, of course, the book itself is going to be one of the books, but anyway. E. Alpers, The East African Slave Trade. I.A. Akin Jogben, Dahomey and Its Neighbors. The first two are short accounts of the impact of slave exports on the African regions concerned. The third is a detailed account by a Nigerian scholar of Dahomey's involvement with Europeans. So again, he cites his own book, which is, you know, he's supposed to do that. Again, you're supposed to do that. Look after your own needs. J. Egarevba, A Short History of Benin. Bie Ogot, A History of the Southern Luo. Ikimambo, A Political History of the Pare. And J. Vansina, Kingdom of the Savannah. The first three are good examples of scholarship by Africans concerning historical development starting before contact with Europe. They are characterized by the use of African oral tradition as a basis for interpretation. The fourth, by a European, was a pioneering work which drew heavily on oral traditions in reconstructing Central African history. And finally, we have J. Ayayi, a Christian mission to Nigeria, and E. Ayandele, the missionary impact on modern Nigeria. One aspect of the imperial epoch that has been probed by African historians and many non-Africans is that of Christian missionaries, as evidenced by the above work. So that's it, pretty much. That's actually the entirety of it. Thanks, everybody, for coming through. If anybody has some comments, looks like we have a comment. Forecast says they got those gamer books and cheat codes for the games. We trying to play fair and square, assuming everyone else will. Yeah, I mean, I think there was this game. I mean, I don't know why I would have... I don't know why I would have played it, but you know, back in the day, there was this game called America's Army, which was a free. It was a free game. It was like a free like Call of Duty game that you could play online, and it was actually designed by the U.S. military so that young people would apply to be a part of the American Army. Okay, America had its own self-interest. Nobody's giving you anything for free, but either way, they have this game. It's a pretty good game. You're playing it, and then as soon as you hear somebody else, you're dead, right? How are you dead so fast? How could somebody have such fast reflexes? How could somebody shoot that fast, right? They can't. They use a machine. They use an AI cheat code. They use a bot, a shoot bot. That's what you're supposed to do. Well, we come up to the game and we're like, yeah, I'm just gonna, if I work on my skills, you can't beat a fucking machine. This thing, as soon as it detects another player, dead. Right? As soon as you hear, you're like, oh, I think somebody might be there, dead. Respawn. Right? And we're like, if I go there, I could dodge and I could strafe and I could shoot. You can't. But that's the whole thing. There's this cartoon. I didn't really watch it, but it was like a Disney cartoon with dogs, maybe like a dog and a cat. I think it's like Oliver or something like that. But the guy says, I think there's a song that I remember as a kid. It's like, why should I worry? Why should I care? Whatever, right? So I looked it up on YouTube, and in the beginning of the song, the dog, I think, steals hot dogs from the cat, and the cat says, that's not fair. And the dog says, fair's for tourists. And I don't know. I think they're saying that you don't pay for fare in New York, like you just jump over the turnstile or something. Or maybe they meant, fares is in whatever. But the point being that nobody goes by fare except for people who don't understand that nobody goes by fare. It's like I was saying, like, when you flirt with a woman, what's fair is to be like, well, I understand are you talking to any other guys? Well, try to talk to other guys, and, talk to other guys and circle back to me when you're finished. No, you say, hey, look, let me get my advantage right now. I hope you're not talking to any other guys. You know what I'm saying? Let me see you talking to. If you talking to other guys, I ain't even trying to. Like you gotta put it in your advantage. You gotta put the ball in your court. You can't arrive at this world thinking that fair is what it is. Because again, all warfare is based off of deception. All strategy is based off of deception. So if you're going to be strategic, yeah, you have to be a little deceptive, or you have to peep deception. I tell y'all, I kind of wish I didn't know deceptive people. Now, I'm an honest person for the most part, right? But even I know that, yeah, you have to be strategic. Like if you're talking to a lady, you don't let her know. I mean, look, if you're transparent, you can, obviously. Sometimes I'm transparent, right? Sometimes I'm transparent. Or I was transparent when I was in Tanzania, because my phone would ring, my phone would ring, and they'd be like, "Is that a lady?" And you're like, "Yeah, but like, yeah, even then, a lot of women are like, just don't, it's like that song, which I think is probably one of the worst songs, one of the most simpish songs, I can't sing right now for some reason, but I don't wanna know if you're playing, yeah, anyway, that's such a simple song. I would never say that, but the thing is that it's true. You don't want to know. If the woman's playing you, tell her to keep it on the low. You know what I'm saying? Or even like the other song, Jamaican song. This is a good song. With nobody have to know, and you and me are, nobody have to know. But all I'm saying is that, yeah, you have to go about with being deceptive, or being strategic. If you're really trying to go about and execute, your own self-interest a lot of times. And of course, you can be forward, you can be upfront. A lot of times that's not going to work for you. But and that's okay. I mean, I prefer to be upfront and honest because, like I said, I've met deceptive and manipulative people, and I don't like them. I don't think that's fitting, particularly in a relationship setting. But I'm just saying generally, because again, these Europeans, they were never looking to be in a relationship with you. But anyway, that's pretty much the podcast. Appreciate everybody for coming through and stopping by. Podcast is honest for the most part. I mean, look, yeah, man, like what is absolute honesty? You know what I mean? Like, what is absolute honesty? Sometimes you have to be strategic. That's the truth. Sometimes you have to be strategic. So, like for instance, in fact, when I am honest, I get screwed over. I'll tell y'all this for instance. One time, one woman asked me for some money, and I was like, "Oh, I have that money," and I screenshotted how much money I had, but I'm like, I just don't want to spend it right now. This lady ended up stealing some money from me because I was honest about how much money I had. You know what I'm saying? If you're looking to get a good deal from somebody, or even that's what happened to me when I was when the police were back in Tanzania, right? Police were asking me for a little bit of money for whatever, and so they say Laki, let's say Laki Tatu, right? 300,000 shillings, right? Which is actually in retrospect I realized it was a lot of money, but back then I thought it was nothing. So it was like $150, right? And I was like, is that it? You know? Is that it? And so then they were like, never mind, Lucky Tana. Now, what I should have said is, damn, I can't do Lucky Tatu. You know what I mean? I should have said, no, I can't do 300,000. But if it were $100, if it were $75, then I could do it. That would be a lot easier for me. But instead, I was like, is that it? That's nothing. Ew, that's it? I don't know. I guess I just kind of felt good at the time and felt like I was a baller at the time. And now I'm not. But but what I'm saying is that you have to be strategic because you don't know, especially when you don't know who you're dealing with. Like I said, if you're trying to build a relationship with a woman, obviously you can be honest and upfront and all that kind of stuff because that's what you want in a relationship. But if you're dealing with strangers, you don't tell them, oh yeah, I got this kind of money in the bank. You know what I mean? You don't tell them that. You say, oh man, I can barely eat for myself. You know? You because if when you reveal your hand to somebody and you don't know their intentions, you don't know their, like, you can get screwed over. But yeah, you just said you were just messing, so I'll stop at that. But anyway, that's pretty much the entire podcast. So appreciate everybody. Appreciate everybody for coming through. I don't know if I missed any chat. Dang, I just lost the feed. So yeah, shout out to everybody who was here. For some reason, I pressed live chat and then it just stopped showing me everybody. But I know Matron, Cassidra, Brother Bakari, Bit of Medicine, Organic African Paradigm, Forecast, anybody who I might have missed. But thanks everybody for coming through. Appreciate it. I actually do need more watch hours for my podcast, so I appreciate you guys for coming through and watching. But other than that, Shemim Hotep, Uncle Jah Seneb Neb, Amen, Ma'at, Dua Netra.